Imagine this. Your credit card interest rate gets legally capped at just 10%. For millions of people, that sounds like a total lifesaver, right? But what if that very same move could actually cripple the entire economy? Today, we're going to break down a really simple proposal with some massive consequences. Is this cap a cure for debt, or is it a curse in disguise?
So let's just start with a big what if. What would really happen if your credit card interest was suddenly sliced in half by law? It's a single change, but one that could send ripples from your bank account all the way through the U.S. economy.
Okay, so before we can even talk about a solution, we have to get our heads around the problem. And honestly, it's a problem that boils down to two words: the debt trap. You can think of it like financial quicksand, and it's all thanks to these sky-high interest rates.
Right now, the average credit card APR in the US is sitting at a pretty staggering 21%. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. This isn't just some little fee, it's a massive wealth siphoning machine, and it's quietly working against you every single day you carry a balance.
Here's a pretty wild way to think about it. The legendary investor Warren Buffett built his entire empire on returns averaging just under 20% a year. So when you're paying over 20% to your credit card company, you are giving them better returns than Warren Buffett ever got. It really makes you stop and ask, who are you actually making rich here?
And this is the cycle so many people get trapped in. It all starts out so simple, right? You get a card, you buy a few things you need or want, and the balance just kind of inches up. But then, bam, those high interest charges kick in. All of a sudden, making those minimum payments feels like you're on a treadmill. You're running as fast as you can, but the actual debt you owe barely shrinks at all.
Well, let's put some real numbers to that. With an average credit card debt of around $8,000, if you're only making the minimum payments, you could be stuck paying that thing off for almost a decade. A whole decade. And that's assuming you don't use the card for anything else. It's just a brutal, relentless cycle.
So, in the face of this debt trap, a pretty radical solution has been put on the table. A simple, straight-up cap on interest rates.
The proposal is exactly what it sounds like. A new law would make it illegal for any credit card company to charge more than 10% APR. Period. No loopholes, no exceptions. But, as you can probably guess, this very simple idea kicks off a massive debate.
And this is where we get to the heart of the conflict. You've got one side warning that a rate cap would just choke off credit and grind the whole economy to a halt. And then you've got the other side arguing it's the only way to stop predatory debt and force some healthier financial habits. So let's break down both of these arguments.
All right, first up, let's tackle the argument that this cap is a huge economic threat. The core concern here is really about the unintended consequences. The dominoes that could start to fall all across our consumer-driven economy.
So the thinking goes something like this. You cap the rates at 10%. Well, suddenly banks are making a lot less profit. To protect their bottom line, they can't afford to take on as many risky loans. So what do? They tighten up their lending standards, which means fewer people can even get a credit card. And the final domino to fall, consumer spending just slows way down.
So who gets hit the hardest by this? Well, the irony here is that it could be the very same people this law is supposed to help. We're talking about folks with lower credit scores, or anyone a bank might label as high risk. For a lot of people who rely on credit for everyday essentials, that financial lifeline could just vanish.
The bottom line from this point of view is pretty straightforward. Our whole economy runs on people buying stuff, and a lot of that buying is fueled by credit. If you suddenly turn off that tap, you risk a major economic slowdown that could hurt everyone, from the smallest businesses to the biggest investors.
Okay, but now let's flip the coin and look at the other side of this whole thing. This viewpoint sees the cap not as an economic threat, but as a kind of tough love, a necessary pain for some long-term financial health. This quote right here, it just nails that tough love argument. The idea isn't to punish people by making credit harder to get. It's actually to protect them from taking on debt they just can't handle, and, like the quote says, from destroying your financial future.
What they're really aiming for here is a fundamental shift. We'd move away from an economy that's built on debt-fueled spending and toward one where people are spending what they can actually afford. Yeah, it probably means we all buy less stuff overall, but it could also mean a whole lot less financial stress. And that, from this perspective, is the ultimate prize. Sure, there might be some short-term economic pain, a bit of a sting, but the long-term benefit would be a population that's no longer drowning in high-interest debt. And that leads to more stable households and a more sustainable, even if slightly smaller, economy.
So this all really boils down to what you could call a core conundrum. It's a fundamental clash of values, really. A battle between what's good for the stock market versus what's good for the kitchen table.
This table here really lays out the two different ways of looking at the world, right? The investor perspective values a constantly growing, consumer-fueled economy. More spending means more profit, which means rising stock prices. But the human perspective, it values sustainability, less debt, more peace of mind, even if it means slower growth.
And this is the fundamental trade-off we're left with. Do we want a booming economy, even if it's kind of built on a house of cards? On people buying things they can't really afford? Or do we prioritize the financial stability of our citizens, even if it means we have to pump the brakes on economic growth?
And that leaves us with this final, really crucial question. There's no easy answer here, but it forces us to decide what we actually value more. Is the ultimate goal a bigger, faster, richer economy, no matter the cost to individuals? Or is it a system that gives more people a shot at financial stability and just peace of mind? It's definitely a lot to think about.